Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to the Ingles on the Beat segment. Connor Riley handling the production and back in studio again this week. Connor, am I looking at the right camera? Straight ahead, to the right. Straight ahead, and here we are straight ahead. Today, a giveaway. I love giveaways, and I appreciate the folks who make these bobbleheads. This is the only bobblehead featuring UGA. So here's the giveaway. I know everybody's going to see it. How do you get it? I'm going to jump right in there because giveaways are the most fun ever. I want you to answer on our string right here on the Dog Nation Facebook page or YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. What is your favorite Georgia football win and why? Okay, so you can't just say the Rose Bowl because it was awesome, right? I want some creative writing here. I want some good reasons, right? I want the story within the story. How did it make you feel? What do you remember about that game? Give me some poetry. Give me paint the picture for me, if you will. Last year was my first year covering Georgia as a beat writer, but my favorite Georgia win still goes all the way back to when they beat Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl, and it was because of the moment after the game when that poor Hawaii quarterback was so beat up, he actually went through the handshake line with his helmet still on. That was one reason. I said, you know what, this guy doesn't want to get hit again. I don't know if you remember that route, but I actually freelanced that game for the Honolulu Advertiser. And a long story of why, but I decided to take a week off, right? I was still working in Tennessee as a beat guy, but I had the opportunity. They called me and said, do you do freelance? I said, yeah, sure, I'll do freelance. And Tennessee wasn't playing in a bowl game that year, or they weren't playing in a good one. Anyway, somehow I was able to take a week off and go to the Sugar Bowl, and my expenses were paid, and I got to cover Georgia and work with Claude Felton, who I don't know how many of you know about Claude and Georgia's PR arm, but that's really who everybody kind of, when they equate with Georgia, yes, Kirby Smart is the face of the program nationally, but for the media people who form opinions, the gatekeepers, this PR arm is very important, and Georgia has the best in the country with Claude Felton. Now, I'd work with Claude a little bit here and there when I was covering Auburn and Alabama and Tennessee, and they'd play Georgia. But I was the assigned Georgia beat guy from Honolulu for this game. And Claude allowed us to do interviews on the field after the game. That is so important when you're in the media that you can get to these players. The game had ended around midnight. The deadlines were crazy. I think Honolulu still wanted to get it in their paper the next day, and even though they were 6 hours behind, it was a crazy deadline. And so the fact that I could interview players on the field and the Hawaii quarterback went through the handshake line with his helmet still on after taking that incredible beating, and just how awesome that Georgia team was, I remembered thinking to myself, this is the best team in college football. I don't know who's going to win the championship, but that Georgia team that I saw beat Hawaii that night in New Orleans, to me, was the best team in college football. So that is my favorite Georgia win that I've been at, okay, that I've attended. So most of you have been to a lot more games. I've certainly watched some great wins. And again, I know the Rose Bowl was awesome. I watched it too, and it was a great win. But for me personally, because I covered that game, because I saw that moment, because I thought I was watching the best team in college football, if there had been a 4-team playoff, I think that Georgia team wins the 4-team playoff that year. And I need to go back and look and see what year that was. I want to say 2007. 2006? 2007, Connor tells me, and my memory serves me correctly. Was that the year that LSU won the national championship with 2 losses? I think it was. I think that Georgia football team was the best team in the country. Those are my thoughts. Anyway, that's the giveaway. So write down in there in the comments section your favorite Georgia win and then tell me why. Right? Paint the picture. Tell me why. It doesn't have to be a book. Good writing doesn't have to be long. You can do it in 200 words. You could do it in 3 paragraphs. Right? Get creative. Get good. Win the bobblehead. Connor and I will figure that out as we go. I'm gonna have Connor checking on it. He's gonna tell me who's written what. We'll call out some names and see who's in contention for this. Let's jump right in with a story that I just posted. And I don't know how much of a story it is, okay? The days of what's a story, what's not. For me, I'm always just looking to post information that I think is interesting and relevant. And that's the name of the game. Sometimes it's a full-length feature, a profile on a guy, whether it was the stuff I did with Kenny McIntosh in South Florida, on how he got jilted in his recruitment by Alabama and Ohio State, or whether it was Lawrence Cager comparing Mark Richt, who he played for at Miami, to what he's already observed with Kirby Smart. I know a lot of people like that fire and ice story. Sometimes it's as simple as what the opening line is going to be in the first game, and that's what popped up today. And I was in the office. I said, guys, has anybody seen a line on this Vanderbilt game? Because this website, betonline.ag, and look, I'm not a bettor. I don't know if you can actually go on there and bet it. I have no idea. I know that they send me a lot of stuff, and when they do, we put it out there. It's almost like this is an early line or a suggestive line. So don't get technical with me here. The bottom line is they threw a number out there, and I think it's kind of low. Georgia 24.5 over Vanderbilt in Nashville. And I get it that Vanderbilt's the home team. And listen, I got a lot of respect for Coach Mason and Derek Mason. I really do. But there's going to be 2/3 of that stadium wearing red and black. That's going to be James Coley's first opportunity to show you what this new offense looks like. There's going to be a lot of receivers that want to prove to Kirby Smart they can catch the football. Because if you remember, Kirby left spring saying his biggest concern was the receiving corps, so that means those receivers are going to hear about it throughout the entire fall drills. Every time there's a drop pass, Kirby Smart is going to go off. So these guys are going to want to prove that they can catch the football. Jake Fromm is going to want to throw it around the park. There's not a quarterback controversy. There was not a quarterback controversy last year. There was an attempt to play two quarterbacks. I don't see that happening. Okay, I don't see Kirby having to go to the bench and making sure that Stetson gets so many snaps a game to make anybody happy, all right? He's going to leave Jake in there as long as he wants to leave Jake in there, as long as they can protect him. Certainly you don't want to leave him in there and risk injury any longer than you have to, but you do have to leave him in there long enough to make sure that he establishes a rhythm and gets in game form with these receivers. Now, Georgia's going to scrimmage a lot. I mean, Kirby lets these guys play football in August. I learned that last fall throughout the August drills. Those guys were warriors. I still don't know how they got through that August heat in full equipment as often as they did, and oftentimes with the uniform soiled, which told me there was some degree of scrimmaging going on. Georgia plays a lot of football. Kirby goes best on best a lot. So there's going to be a lot of football played before Georgia takes the field in Nashville. That said, it's not the same as doing it on game day against a different team, against a team that doesn't know the playbook, that can't anticipate and jump routes like Eric Stokes did in the G-Day game when he had the pick six early, okay? Eric, great DB. I think he's one of the best, but he knew what was coming. That's why he jumped the route. That's not going to happen in real life, okay? Eric will get interceptions, but he's not going to be able to make reads like that in real life, okay? And Jake isn't going to have to go up against a defense that knows what he's doing in real life. And oh, by the way, don't forget, Georgia didn't really show you what their offense was in the G-Day game. There was a very, very limited amount of plays they were showing you. They are not going to show you the bells and whistles. So, getting back to my opening comments on this line, 24.5. What do I think is realistic? 35 points, right? 5 touchdowns or more. The running backs, I think Swift is going to get off to a great start, but another guy that you want to be very measured with early on, you need DeAndre Swift there in December and in January in those playoff games. There's no reason to think that DeAndre Swift is going to carry for 25 times for 200 yards. He might carry 8 times for 200 yards, but he's not going to get 20 carries in the opener. Not unless there's something crazy happens and it's a close game, which I don't think will happen. So you're going to see a lot of young guys get touches. I think Brian Herrien is going to wear it out. I think he's going to wear Vanderbilt out. Brian Herrien might actually be your leading rusher in game 1 because Brian is going to pound it this year. We're going to see big things from Brian Herrien. He's on the Senior Bowl watch list. Okay, so Swift and Herrien, is there a chance that he gets 1,000 yards? Maybe. It's going to be close. Again, depends on how many games. I think it's a 15-game schedule. So right now, if you ask me, I think Herrien's going to be right around 900, 1,000 yards. I think Swift's going to be around 1,500 yards. Those are my thoughts. We'll see. It's early. Right now, just kind of mind-popping, thinking about that opening game. How do I think it's going to play out? I think Georgia jumps to a really big lead. I think Kirby leaves Jake in. I think it's a controlled passing game. And I think the defense probably holds Vanderbilt to 10 points or less. I'm going to say that opening game maybe 49-10. How about that? 47-10, something like that. It was 41-13 last year. Now, It's all about Georgia here. On the Beat, brought to you by Eagles each week. It's all about Georgia. That said, they did put out lines for some of these other games involving SEC teams. And one of the things that I want to do a little bit more of this year is talk a little bit more around the SEC. Not a ton, but enough to keep you informed. Georgia, in my mind, is the top dog. You got to kind of pay attention to what other people are doing. When your team is winning the conference or competing for championships every year, it's worth it to take a look around and see what the other teams are. Who could pose the greatest challenge? All I've heard this offseason was Florida's going to be so much better. Now, recently, we know they've kind of spiraled down. Mullen ran his mouth. Bad things started happening. Players started transferring. Now they're decommitting. Is Florida still the biggest threat to Georgia in the East? I don't think so, but I think most people would say they think the Gators are the biggest threat. So this surprised me to see that Miami is an 8-point favorite over Florida in Orlando. I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm not sure I'm buying that. Even as down as Florida is, I just don't see it, okay? There's a reason Lawrence Cager is coming to Georgia. There's a vibe. It's going to take a little while, I think, for that program to get anywhere close to back to where it was. I don't think Miami will beat Florida. I'm a little surprised by that line. Thursday, August 29th, Texas A&M 34.5 over Texas State. Who cares? Kentucky 13 over Toledo. I say upset alert. I'm not convinced Kentucky's going to have much. They lost a lot of great players. Toledo generally a pretty good MAC team. Mississippi State 22 over Louisiana Lafayette. Who cares? How about this one? Memphis 6 over Ole Miss. Don't usually see an SEC team as an underdog in the opener. I think I would take Ole Miss to win that. Not a big believer in Memphis. Tennessee 26 over Georgia State. It was just a couple weeks ago. Connor had a story. ESPN said that Tennessee was the trap game for Georgia. Maybe ESPN got confused. Maybe they meant for Georgia State, because I certainly don't think Tennessee is going to be close to Georgia this year. But they are favored by 26 over Georgia State. Alabama 30.5 over Duke. Not a surprise. Why is David Cutcliffe playing this game? Did you know David Cutcliffe went to Alabama? That's a true story. He was actually roommates with Mike Dubose, who was the Alabama football coach after Gene Stallings. And Dubose thought that David Cutcliffe was going to come and be his offensive coordinator. So much so, he told me to go ahead and write it. It didn't happen. Tennessee bucked up the money, and Alabama had to settle for Bruce Arians. Yes, Bruce Arians was the Alabama offensive coordinator. Former NFL Coach of the Year, Bruce Arians was the Alabama offensive coordinator in 1997 and got fired after 1 year. South Carolina, 7.5-point favorite over North Carolina. How about that? Not sure what to make of that. Are either one of those teams going to be any good this year? LSU 26 over Georgia Southern. Missouri 15 over Wyoming. And Auburn 2 over Oregon in Arlington, Texas. I will want to watch that game on Saturday, August 31st. I need to know the time because that's a game I want to watch. That's interesting. I want to see what Oregon's doing. I'm hearing Oregon's going to get physical and tough and bring SEC out. I don't know why they want to do that. I loved what they did when they were running the spread with Marcus Mariota. I think that's the way Oregon should go. This get physical tough thing on the West Coast, I don't think it works. I don't know what to think about Auburn's offense right now. I think their defense is pretty good. I guess I would be inclined to go with Auburn just because Oregon is changing their offense around. So that's the opening line. Not sure what y'all think about that, but I wanted to run that by you. Big commitment. Joshua Braun, I saw Connor Riley had this up last night. Jeff Santel, back from vacation, has since followed up. Tons of coverage on this on Dog Nation. If for some reason you're just coming out of your cave and you missed this commitment, this is a big deal. A kid whose brothers played at Georgia Tech, another guy they take out of Florida, and you just look at this guy. He just looks like a player. That's got to be worth something, right? How does the guy look? I mean, this guy looks good. He looks like $1 million. Like if you met him on the street, you'd say, "You play football, don't you? And you play on the offensive line." Pittman with the commitment video with the Bulldog last night. Loved it. Carvel got that up as a viral post for us. A lot of fun. And, man, if you're a Georgia fan, you got to be digging that stuff. As a beat guy, I dig into recruiting here and there, but I've never been this interested in recruiting since I started covering Georgia, just because of the way Georgia recruits and the way that, these commit, like the Pittman thing. That reels me in. I mean, that's fun. That's fun stuff. You wonder, how's Pittman going to do it this week? And to do it with the live Bulldog, that was something else. So that was a lot of fun. And Georgia's offensive line. Now, here's what everybody's saying. Oh, my gosh, they got so many. Look, they don't have as many as you think. Here's why. I think 4 of those 5 offensive linemen off of this year's team are going pro. And they're all underclassmen, okay? So Thomas is a junior. He's already looked at as a top 5 pick. In fact, I think he's probably the Outland Trophy candidate, left tackle. Left guard, Solomon Kinley, another junior, I believe a redshirt junior at that. I think Solomon's going to go pro, and I think he'll go in the first 2 rounds. At right guard, Big Ben Cleveland, after having that broken leg bone last year, Big Ben knows how quick it can go away. He's a redshirt junior. I think he goes in the first 2 rounds. And don't be surprised if Isaiah at right tackle doesn't go either. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he's eligible. So then all of a sudden, boom, you lose 4 guys. Trey's back at center. Jamari and Cade Mays, that's 3, okay? You got to have 2 more starters in there. So the guys they're getting now, this is needed. A reload is going to be needed in 2020. And nobody's going to want to see Georgia fall off. Everybody always, oh, yeah, I get it. I understand. Players leave. There's going to be some years. But when the time comes, nobody says, oh, yeah, this is the year. We're good with it. No. Everybody is going to expect Georgia to repeat as the SEC champions in 2020 after they win it this season. Some might even expect them to win the SEC again. Now, I think that's tough, especially if Jake Fromm goes pro. And you got to wonder about Jake a little bit. Because if you're losing 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen and you're Jake Fromm, and I've seen Jake projected in the first round, you got to wonder. So it's important to get these linemen. You can't have enough because the running backs see it and the quarterbacks see it as well, right? And then the receivers see the quarterbacks. So it all goes together. So the bottom line is this is very important that Georgia is getting it done with these type of quality commitments like a Joshua Braun. I mean, this was big news last night. I mean, I woke up and read my phone when I saw it buzzed and that Connor had this story up. It was like, here we go again. And then that Pittman video put a smile on my face. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I'll come back and talk transfer. I want to check in with Connor, though. I've asked you to give me your best Georgia game memories, your favorite Georgia game, and tell me why. The winner gets the UGA bobblehead. And I've asked Connor if he would keep up with it. Connor, do we have some good responses? Is there anything in there that's moving the needle yet?
Yeah, we've got a couple of good ones. Matt Goodwin says the 2017 Notre Dame game highlighted by the circus catch Terry Godwin had in the corner of the end zone. It was the only touchdown pass that day for Jake Fromm, but it proved, I think, to probably be the biggest offensive play of the game for Georgia there, where they ended up winning that one. Let's see, the 1980 National Championship game, also a game against Notre Dame. There are a lot of Notre Dame answers on here. That one comes from Julia Clark-Jones. She gives a great anecdote about her dad. Still scrolling. The 1980 Florida game, Run, Lindsey, Run, a very iconic, Georgia play, Georgia moment. Keep them coming, I think. Hold on. So again, just to recap, what is your favorite UGA win and why? You sort of explain that, and you get a wonderful UGA bobblehead that Mike is going to be gifting away.
That's right.
Another sort of under the radar, maybe even forgotten game, a 2004 game against LSU. I want to see who actually mentioned it. Anyway, in that game, LSU was the defending national champions, and Georgia, had taken a step back in 2003. But Georgia came into that game and just absolutely beat the tar out of a really good Nick Saban-led LSU team, and hopefully we see something similar in this year to come. But right now, a lot of Notre Dame games, whether that be the 2017 game or the national championship game in 1980. A lot of Florida mentions. I forget who mentioned it earlier. They mentioned the 1997 Florida game. It's Kirby Smart's only win against Florida as a player. I believe he had 2 interceptions in that game as well. And his performance in that day was a really big win for Georgia, and sort of a, when the 90s weren't great for Georgia and the Georgia-Florida rivalry, but that was certainly a special day for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's awesome. I mean, thanks, Connor. I'll check in here again a little bit. That's awesome. I mean, for me, that resonates. I mean, what a knowledgeable fan base that we're sitting here and in 15 minutes, you all give me that history lesson. And you're able to tell me why, and you're able to tell me about these big wins. I mean, looking at it from an outsider's point of view, before I covered Georgia, I guess I would have thought everything would have been about Florida, but this Notre Dame history is really special. I think this year's game is going to be really special too. I think it's going to be a real launch point for Georgia. I guess in the eyes of because look, even though we all know that how good Georgia really is, there's some people out there, believe it or not, I don't want to call them the lunatic fringe, but let's just say the fringe fan, until they beat somebody outside the SEC or until they're in a game that gets a lot of national attention, Georgia's just going to be sitting there probably at number 3 or number 4, number 5. I'm not sure where they're going to be when these polls come out. I would certainly think they would be no lower than 3 in my estimation. Now, my preseason number 1 is Clemson. I mean, to me, Clemson is the team to beat. Trevor Lawrence goes into this year, in my book, I think he's the best quarterback in the country. Now, that's after watching him in the spring game, and the guy's gotten bigger, thicker, and the arm strength and the receivers, I mean, Clemson looks really good, and their schedule looks really bad. So the numbers for Clemson are going to be outrageous, and I think Clemson's the team to beat. I think the hire, and I know that, I don't know how, I guess I shouldn't say I know. I really don't know what Georgia fans think about Terry Bowden. But I'll tell you this. I covered Terry in 1993 as his beat writer. They went 11-0. It was his first year coaching in the SEC. I want to say they won their first 19 games with Terry. This was the best game day play caller I have ever covered. I could not predict what he was going to do. The Georgia fans, you get it, right? You all knew probably 75% of the time what Jim Chaney was going to call, whether it was going to be a run or a pass. Let's be honest. You get a feel for your team. You see the way the team lines up. You notice the depth of the tailback. You get familiar with the formations. You say down and distance, this formation, Chaney's probably going to call, right? And you usually know. You get a feel for that. I was at every Auburn practice. I could not dial it down with Terry Bowden. The reason I bring Terry up is he's going to Clemson as a graduate assistant. And, you know, some of the internet troll people, oh, look, he's old and he's Buster Brown and ha, he's not. Look, this guy studied in Oxford, England, okay? He's got a law degree. Terry Bowden has a genius IQ. That is no joke, folks. And he knows football. He played running back, a walk-on running back at West Virginia for Daddy Bowden, all right? The guy knows football. You are putting that mind in the same room now with those Clemson coaches. That's a lot of continuity on that Clemson staff. And now you're bringing one of the highest IQ football minds into that room to troubleshoot, to watch film, and to bounce things off of. You know, he won what? I think he went to 2 bowl games at Akron. Everybody goes, well, what does that mean? Akron was the worst program in the country, all right? Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that Terry Bowden is a first ballot Hall of Famer. What I am telling you is this is a very good move for Clemson, for Terry Bowden, and this makes Clemson even better. Now, do I think they'll beat Georgia? I don't know. I don't know where those teams are going to be when they meet up in the playoffs. I think Georgia has a great chance at winning the SEC. I'm on record predicting that. I think Georgia will win a playoff game minimum. I expect Georgia to play for the national title, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't Clemson. Would love to see the game. Don't know who's going to be healthier. That has a lot to do with it. We saw that last year. Georgia had Alabama beat, man. Alabama's beat if DeAndre Walker doesn't go down with an injury. Georgia wins that football game. They could not block DeAndre Walker last year. Of course, all anybody wanted to talk about was Jalen Hurts coming off the bench and Jalen Hurts this. Look, if DeAndre Walker's in the game, Jalen Hurts doesn't have time to roll right. Containment's not broken. He doesn't have time to throw. The point being, you got to stay healthy. You got to have key players. And I don't know who's going to be healthy for Georgia or Clemson or Alabama at the end of the year. But to me, that's what's going to determine who the national champion is. So keep that in mind. And wanted to throw that Terry Bowden thing out there. I think that's noteworthy as somebody that covered Terry and knows how his mind works and just how unpredictable he is of a play caller. I have that much respect for him as a football mind. I think that's only going to help Clemson out. And obviously their schedule helps them out too. I think their toughest game is a home game against Texas A&M. I want to touch on the portal, the transfer portal. There's been a lot of talk this week. When Dog Nation had an opportunity to talk to David Pollack, David brought that up. And I think David is another great football mind, and one of the reasons that I'm a fan, yes, you don't often hear journalists say they're a fan, but I am a fan of David Pollack on College Game Day because Pollack will tell you what he thinks and he doesn't worry about stepping on toes. I respect that because I know how hard that is when you swim upstream and when you make comments that maybe not everyone's going to agree with. In today's world on Twitter, the mob forms fast and people come after you, and people want to say that you're a member of the Flat Earth Society if you don't agree or if you don't go with what the majority thinks. I respect that David Pollack puts his opinions out there without any concern of how popular it's going to be or what people are going to think. And Pollack had some words about the transfer portal. He sounded off about it. He wants more consistency. He doesn't understand why Luke Ford got denied and why Justin Fields got approved. He's not the only one that feels this way. Now, what Greg Sankey is trying to do with the SEC and what the coaches met and discussed was how about if a kid knows before he puts his name in the transfer portal if he's going to have immediate eligibility? Because that would affect the decision. I'm not so sure that Luke Ford would have transferred back to Illinois if he knew he had to sit out a year. Pollack, today's Dog Nation story, I think it's a good read. Look, nobody wants to beat up the Justin Fields thing, okay? Justin Fields has moved on to Ohio State, and Jake Fromm is the man at Georgia. But I thought Pollack's parting shots on that were very interesting. I will just tell you, I think it's worth a read, and I'm in complete agreement with what David Pollack sees moving forward for both Fromm and Fields. So a couple of David Pollack stories I want to make sure I touch on. Connor, we've been rolling a while. Before I close this out, give me some more highlights. I want to give people one last chance to enter into the contest to win the UGA bobblehead doll here on the Ingles on the Beat segment today. And what I want you to give us is your favorite Georgia win, and then tell me why. Okay, it doesn't have to be a certain amount of words. Just put it out there, man. I'm looking for creativity. I'm looking for narrative. I'm looking for authenticity. You know, little known fact, a few years ago, I actually judged the Georgia Sports Writers Contest. That was kind of interesting. Now I work with a lot of these guys. They're all talented. They were all good. And what I learned from judging that Sports Writers Contest was it's so subjective, right? So the first thing I did was, and I'm not going to do this today, but the first thing I did in the writing contest was look for people who had misspelled words and typos and things like that. Okay, your entry's disqualified, because there was over 100 entries. Then I looked for things that I thought displayed good journalism. Okay, I'm not going to do that with y'all either. I don't need to see the inverted pyramid. I don't need to see a nut graph. I don't need to see an ending that ties into the lead. I don't need to see fancy or slick attribution. I'm not looking for transitions, okay? I'm looking for the final thing. I got it down to 5 entries. And the final thing, and the way I picked my winner was what moved me, right? What did I read that moved me? That's what it really came down to. And it turned out to be some story, and I can't remember who, and I can't remember the details. Again, it was 3 years ago, but it was something about the author painted the scene of a guy getting in the car and turning it to the radio station that his dad always listened to. I don't know why that communicated, but it was an athlete that did that. And so don't start writing about songs you heard on the radio after the game. But my point is, I'm looking for something to move me here. Connor is also a very good judge of good journalism. He's a UGA Journalism School graduate. It's one of the finest journalism schools in the country. Connor, what are you seeing out there that's raising some eyebrows in our contest?
Brad Morgan gives a really detailed he's even got the date down. Georgia beat Clemson October 5th, 1991. Eric Zier was the quarterback that day. Later on, the Braves win the National League Western Division Championship to go from worst to first. And later that night, while they were out at Waffle House, no doubt celebrating the win over Clemson, Brad Morgan sees Zier at Waffle House.
Oh, wow.
Great end to a day there. John Fitzgerald says being at the Rose Bowl game when Georgia beat Oklahoma in overtime. I think if there's a recent game, it's probably either that Notre Dame game or that Oklahoma game. Georgia's first time in the Rose Bowl since I think 1945. School's only playoff win was a all-around great day for some of the real heroes of the Georgia program, whether it be Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Roquan Smith, Jake Fromm. Andy Hall, he brings up the Hobnail boot game in 2001. David Green to Vernon Hayes, the first real signature win of the Mark Richt era. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of. We're gonna have a tough decision to make here on who ends up getting.
This is pretty strong.
There are a lot of strong suggestions here. Josh Fitzgerald mentions the fan. I don't know how much you know this, when 2007, or I believe it was 2008, when Noshawn Marino hurdled a Central Michigan defender. He's going with that one. I don't know about that game as a whole. Georgia won in a blowout.
That's quite a moment.
That's a great moment in Georgia history, or at least a fun one.
Well, I'll tell you, I do remember the hobnail boot game because I was covering Tennessee then, and that absolutely tore the hearts out of Tennessee fans. In fact, I've still got a story to write. I'm glad you brought that up because I called Casey Clausen last week as soon as I found out that Pollock was going in the Hall of Fame. Look, and here's the deal. He's going in the Hall of Fame. I know that right now it's just that the ballot is out, but David Pollock is going in the College Football Hall of Fame in 2020. Why didn't he go in 2019? Because there's this unwritten rule that schools can't have players go in back-to-back years, and Stinchcomb went in 2018. Pollock's going in 2020. So my first thought was, I need to call Georgia coaches. Got to get a hold of Mark Richt. Got to find Van Gorder. He's at Bowling Green right now, by the way. And wouldn't it be cool to talk to somebody that played against David Pollock? I knew exactly who to call. It was Casey Clausen out in California, and Casey remembered, and I need to write that story. You will read that on Dog Nation in the next couple days. Casey laughed out loud and said, why are you bringing up these nightmares? I said, because Pollock's going in the Hall of Fame, Casey, and nobody can tell us about David Pollock like you. He said, all you need to know is we couldn't block him, Mike. All right? We did everything we could. We threw two guys at him. I said, I get it. I said, tell me the story because I want to write it. So I'm going to write that story for Dog Nation in the next couple days. That hobnail boot game, though, remember, Tennessee thought they were on the verge of something special. Georgia tore the Tennessee Vols' hearts out. Unbelievable. And that 0-1 team was that close to playing for a national championship, right? I mean, they were right there. They were a top 2 or 3 team. And that Georgia team, that defense, the Davids, I think I can still remember the teleconference. Yep, it's coming to me now. I think we put David Green on I want to say he was on a speakerphone to talk to the Tennessee media, and we might have asked him about, what do you think about playing in Neyland Stadium with all the crowd? And Green said something to the effect that he wasn't worried, and oh boy, we couldn't wait to see what was going to happen to this freshman quarterback, and instead he silenced Neyland Stadium. And everybody looked at each other and said, wow, this David Green guy is going to be pretty doggone good. And he was. I think he was Pollock's roommate, wasn't he? Pretty sure he was Pollock's roommate.
Yeah, I believe that might have been the case.
Yeah, I think the Davids slayed the Goliath Vols that year, that particular year. Nowadays, the tables are turned. Georgia's the Goliath. I was looking back today when I was looking at this Vanderbilt line, this 24.5-point line. It's where we started this conversation with. Was that the last SEC home game that Georgia lost? I think it might have been.
It was.
I think it might have been.
It was a game they absolutely should not have lost.
Oh, believe me. Last year it came up, Connor, because when we were talking about the Vanderbilt game, it was, the last time Vanderbilt played here, they beat Georgia. Well, that darn sure wasn't going to happen, and it didn't last year. So, man, I don't know how to decide how are we going to decide this winner? I wish BA was here and I could consult him. How do we decide this, Connor? Do we do it after the show? Do I need to announce it now?
I think let's do it after the show. Make it a little surprise to them. There are a lot of great submissions, but we gotta sort of have a meeting of the minds and pick a deserving winner. And there are a lot of them.
Yeah, there are. And listen, I'm going to go through this, and just so you know, I'm going to go through this and do my homework. I want to read. I want to know what touches Georgia fans, and this is a great exercise for that. That wasn't originally how I planned it, but I'm going to take advantage of reading what the fans say. We got a knowledgeable fan base here that watches us on the Georgia football Facebook page, on the Dog Nation page. A lot of you watch BA. Certainly he informs you every day. Connor also does all those stories. You can read and learn about Georgia on our Dog Nation page or follow us here on the Facebook page. So now it's your chance as readers to give Griffin education. And you are. And these are the kind of memories that I need to know. I was a little surprised before I go. The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, and I don't know if I can call this story up quick enough, if I can find this Kirby Smart Q&A with the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So this year, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl has this kickoff classic golf outing where all these coaches go to it. And used to be that the media would go to it and do these interviews. It was an opportunity, an off-season opportunity to see the coach and to meet with coaches from other programs and yada, yada, yada. Well, this year they decided The coaches didn't want to have to deal with the media. It's a year-round recruiting cycle. I get that. These guys are tired. The last thing they want is to go in there and get henpecked by media, because we're going to ask tough questions because we know we've got fans that want answers. So when I go in a room, I'm thinking I better ask questions that people want to know the answer to. And sometimes they're tough questions, right? So instead, this year, the coaches got asked questions by the PR people that were running the Chick-fil-A Golf Classic. This was, I guess, a month or two ago. So Kirby was playing for the Kirby Smart Family Foundation, something that him and Mary Beth started. We all know that. And here were some interesting questions he got asked, some Q&A. Not questions I would have asked as a beat writer. Okay, believe me. The guys would throw me out of the room if I asked it. Can you imagine in a press conference if I said, Coach, Mike Griffith here, AJC Dog Nation, is there one thing you would have liked to have invented? No, that would not fly. But Kirby's answer is pretty good. The smartphone. I get it, right? He talks about how it's changed recruiting. So I liked Kirby's answer that if there's one thing he could have invented, it would have been the smartphone. They asked him about golf, which I just, what can I say? I got picked to play Augusta National in the media draw in 1994. I realized that after that, everything was downhill, so I don't golf anymore. I'll never do anything better or have any greater golf moment than playing Augusta National in 1994. It happened early in life. I'll never beat it, and so I don't pursue it. But just so you know, Kirby Smart was asked if he'd rather have a 300-yard drive down the middle of the fairway every time moving forward or every putt within 6 feet, and he went with the putting skills. He was asked about pregame rituals. One of them was that he would leave a tie tied at Alabama. Now, this was interesting. What was your most meaningful win? This blew me away because I don't know how many of you remember reading this story, but the answers are probably not going to be the same as what you all are thinking. I think most Georgia fans would say the Rose Bowl was the most meaningful win. I could be wrong. Most meaningful Kirby Smart win. Kirby says the SEC championship game win over Auburn and the North Carolina game in the Chick-fil-A Classic, because it was his first. So there you go. That surprised me. And I guess that's why I brought that up, because sometimes my perception or your perception doesn't necessarily match a reality. And so what I might think is a big win, or maybe I'm wrong, but when I did a poll shortly after this, and I'm pretty sure that the two most popular Kirby Smart wins were they were Notre Dame, at Notre Dame, and the Rose Bowl. That's what the fans voted. But Kirby's two most meaningful wins, Auburn and North Carolina. So it's interesting. So I'm going to take Connor's advice. We're going to look at these entries after the show. We'll announce the winner on the top of the thread. I'll get your information, and we'll be able to get you this bobblehead. Really appreciate those folks. This is a numbered bobblehead. They're going to have more coming out. I'll be able to give you more information if you email me or ask me. I can help you out with that. It's been a fun show today. I like to have sort of an idea what I'm going to talk about, but the reality of it is I never really know where it's going to go until I start. And that's really, I'd say probably half of my stories are that way. It's like I collect all these quotes. I'll go to a press conference. I'll kind of have an idea of what some themes are, and knowing I'm going to write several stories. But when I start writing the story, what quotes jump out? What's the most meaningful thing? What are the things that I find interesting? If I find interesting, I think you'll probably find it interesting. And sometimes as I sit here and do shows like this and conversations like this, I get on a topic and it just kind of gets me revved up. And talking about great Georgia football wins really kind of gets me revved up, because in the off season, I've had a chance to go back and look a little bit deeper into Georgia football history. Obviously, I want to learn as much as I can about this program as fast as I can and get the proper context. And to me, reading what fans say and hearing what fans say, that's the reality of it, okay? The history book may say one thing, all right? The national pollsters say another, but fan bases have a different level of, what's the word I'm looking for? They have a different level of involvement with their program and a different affection, right? So what's important to Georgia fans? What matters to them? I'm anxious to read these stories. I'm anxious to read these entries on the biggest Georgia win and why. I'm going to wrap up today's Ingles on the Beat segment. I appreciate Ingles for the sponsorship. Appreciate BA letting me in the studio today. Connor's production is great. It's something a lot of people take for granted. Trust me, don't. Great production is very important to every show, and I really appreciate the job that Connor Riley does for us at Dog Nation. Remember, look for that Casey Clausen story. I'm going to have that story about what Casey said about David Pollock. I think it's good to hear it from somebody else. Pollock was an absolute animal, and I think he does a tremendous job as a commentator right now. You might want to read that story about Jake Fromm we got up on Dog Nation today. So we're going to close it out from here. Everybody have a great Monday.